Hey guys, this is the second video for your group meetings. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to recap Sunday's sermon pretty quickly, and then I'm going to give you three jumping off questions to use for your group discussion this week. And so we talked about Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 15 on Sunday, but there are three of those verses that I want us really to focus in on for kind of our recap time for this week, and that's Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 11 through 15. And so let's look first at verse 11. And the writer of Ecclesiastes says, God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart, but even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. And he's sort of talking here about these two polar opposites that we live in between as human beings, and it's not always an easy place to be. He said, God designs everything to be beautiful in its time. In other words, everything is assigned a time. Every person is assigned to a time, and God makes us beautiful in that time. He put us in this time for this time, and this time is all that we have. But on the flip side of that, he says, there's this desire in every human being for eternity. And what he means by that is that even though God has given every human being a specific time to live in and a specific time to be beautiful in, every human being longs and desires to sort of live outside of the time that God has given us. And so you can see this really practically in the way all of us sort of live our lives, because we worry about past things in the past when we weren't alive. And we worry a lot or have fears a lot about the future, which is time we're not living in yet. And some of it may be time that we're not alive for. And then on top of that, have you ever noticed how we're always rushing around in life? It's almost as if we're never in this moment, but we're always rushing after the next moment, going after the next thing, as if somehow life is not right now in front of us, but life will be better or will be real, or we'll actually find life 10, 15, 20, 30 days, even 5, 10, 15 years from now. And so he says, we're in this conundrum. God has given us life now, and God intends for us to be beautiful in the time he's given us now. But our minds and our hearts are always focused in wanting to live and worry and think about time that God hasn't given us just yet. And so in response to sort of living in this conundrum, the writer of Ecclesiastes offers some advice in verses 12 and 13. And this is his advice. He says, so I concluded that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to enjoy themselves as long as they can. And people should eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of their labor, for these are the gifts of God. And so what the writer of Ecclesiastes is saying is you've got these two polar opposites. God's given you this certain amount of time, but your heart is always stuck and your mind is always stuck thinking about and worrying about time and striving after time that God hasn't given you. So what you need to do is focus on the time God has given you. He's saying be a very present focused person. There's the old Latin saying carpe diem, which means seize the day. And the idea there is that all you can do, because you can't change the past, you can't know exactly what's coming in the future. So what you're left with is just seize the day. And the writer of Ecclesiastes is saying, really, sanctify the time that God has given you. Instead of treating the time you haven't been given as special time, treat the time that you have been given as special time. Seek to be a part of making yourself beautiful, of making the world beautiful, of making beautiful the time that you have been given to live in. I use this word sanctify, which is an Old Testament sort of term. And in the Old Testament, when they sanctified something, or when God sanctified something, it meant that he was setting it aside to be used for a special purpose, to be used in an appropriate way, to be taken care of and treated properly. And so if there were items that were in the temple that were sanctified, which meant that they were supposed to be treated special and used only for specific purposes. And so when we say sanctify the time that you've been given, that's what we're saying about time. Use the time that you have been given and use it well. Don't be focused on time that you don't have. Don't treat the time you don't have as if it's something special, but treat the time you do have as if it's something special. Because here's the thing, if you don't sanctify the time that God has given you, then your time will run out and you won't have enjoyed any of it, because that's the other thing the writer of Ecclesiastes wants us to know. You've been given this certain portion of time, so sanctify it, treat it well, treat it with respect. So that's just kind of a recap. Our main point from Sunday was sanctify the time that you have been given. That's an important part of not being busy and not being run down all the time. Sanctify the time that you have been given. So here's your three jumping off questions for this week. The first question is this: what is your biggest worry about the past? And what is your biggest fear about the future? Because a part of that, having eternity planted in our hearts, is always wanting to be concerned about the past or concerned about the future, times in which we're not living. So what are the biggest worries about the past or the biggest fears of the future that really prevent you from sanctifying the time that you've been given? Question number two is this: what is sort of the next big thing that you're rushing after? I mean, is there something 5, 10, 15 days, 5, 10, 20 years from now, and you're sort of spending all of your life thinking and working toward that thing, and maybe that's preventing you from sanctifying the time that you have now? And the third jumping off question is this: share with your group members a specific way that you're going to focus in on sanctifying the time that you've been given. Is there a specific time this week, a specific event that you're just really going to make yourself present to that moment, and you're going to treat that moment as if it's special and as if it's really too special to be rushed through? So those are the three jumping off questions for this week, and just want to pray and am praying and hope that God blesses you as you guys talk about what it means to sanctify the time you've been given.